It's the end of another year of Guild Wars 2, and indeed, it is a year to remember, as this blog post points out. But today, goodness me, what a twist. We're not reading this, because in fact, we have something else to read. We have an interview with Grouch, ArenaNet leader, which basically says kind of the same stuff in the official blog post here on the Guild Wars 2 website, but actually a little bit more direct, a little bit kind of less vague and hand-wavy, and some very clear, concise communication. A couple of interesting little bits of news here that are going on, including the fact that there's already confirmed a 6th expansion pack coming in 2025. So we have an expansion in 2024, and there's also another one already planned. Expansion number 6! We're in the future, goodness me, for 2025. So Guild Wars 2, you know, dead game, am I right? But yeah, no. It's very interesting, actually. I think that I think ArenaNet actually need to hit this pretty hard, because for some reason, I'm not totally sure why, actually, but there's been a lot of doomsaying about how it's the end and there's never going to be any more expansions for Guild Wars 2. I see that a lot on the subreddit. To be fair, maybe it is just a bunch of, you know, a bunch of doomers going crazy all over the place, right? But I see the sentiment pop up surprisingly often, actually, and, well, yeah, it's not true. I didn't really think there was any evidence to support that, but anyway, here we go. But look at this, a beautiful interview. We've got the Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure thing going on here as well. And let's talk about some stuff, because we've got some pretty interesting information going down here as well. So, basically, what's going on? Guild Wars 2, another expansion next year, another expansion the year after that. The team is massive. Well, it's massive-ish, anyway. It's small compared to other studios, but they've actually been growing the team, right? Like, we've heard that the expansion did very well financially. They've been growing the studio, more devs, more gaming. Maybe that means more content. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see, I guess. But anyway. Another thing that actually got talked about here is elite specializations, right? Of course, we've kind of moved away from those in the game now, but what's quite interesting, and well, not massively surprising here, is that we're not ready to shut the door on elite specializations quite yet. It's always possible they'll make a return in a future expansion. For now, we like the flexibility that focusing on weapons offers, and we've proven out that we can add new layers of gameplay interaction through just the weapons themselves. We plan to focus on weapons for our next expansion, but we'll have a fun surprise in store to keep things fresh and exciting. Yeah, now, that's of course very open for interpretation, but I imagine that might mean an entirely new weapon. Right? Like, that's kind of what I'd be expecting there, as opposed to kind of like shuffling them around and giving them all over the place. So no elite specializations anytime soon, that's for sure. But if they want to, maybe it would happen in the 6th expansion, right? So the one that's coming in 2025. But we do know that the next one, so the one that's coming up next in 2024, that is not going to have elite specializations. It's going to have weapons again. So kind of a similar setup. And this is almost like a little bit of a spoiler here in a way, because of course we have weapons for Secrets of the Obscure, and it seems like weapons again in the next expansion, which is actually a little bit of a surprise. I was maybe expecting some utility skills or some core trait lines to kind of mix it up, but weapons again, fair enough. They are of course very impactful. And, you know, we've already seen this from the beta, right? There's a lot going on there, and they're planning on kind of cramming in quite a lot of design into some of these weapons to try and create new roles and, you know, well, and also engineer shortbow, I guess. So there, you know, there is that one. Okay, that's how it goes. But yeah, also, there's a bit of a fun one here as well. Is Ranger going to get rifle pistol? No comment. Fantastic stuff. You absolutely love to see it there as well. I mean, I'd be surprised if they don't, to be honest, right? Like, you know, that's, yeah, it is what it is. Some interesting information about the Steam numbers too. It remains a small proportion of our overall player base, but this wasn't a surprise for us, given that Guild Wars 2 was available for 10 years on our first-party platform. So, you know, there's always this thing about MMOs that you have no idea how many people are playing. Right? And Steam is very interesting, of course, because it allows you to get that direct insight into how many people are logged on. And this shouldn't be a surprise, right? Like, you know, not that many people are going to be playing on Steam because, I mean, look, you know, you can... The game's been around for a long time, right? And it definitely does open up a new market, and I would expect to see Steam to continuously kind of accrue additional players as time goes on, because of course it is like a really big marketing platform, right? So that's where you're going to get a lot of new players kind of feeding into that, I suppose. It's pretty big. It's pretty big stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if we can really... We don't really know any accurate information. I think it would be really nice. Actually, it'd be really cool. And I think you're going to see this more with new MMOs too. Like stuff like New World, you can see the direct player count all the time. I think that's actually really interesting. It would be really cool to have that type of transparency. But the problem is it never really works out well, because here's the problem with being transparent with your player count. It works out really well for you until you start losing players. This, of course, happened with World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft, when they were at 13 million active subscriptions in Wrath of the Lich King, they're like, yeah, look at this, hype, hype, hype. Then, of course, after that, going into Cataclysm, and especially into some of the more questionable expansions like Warlords of Draenor, that is where the player base went down. And then, of course, it became private. They were no longer kind of talking openly about their subscription numbers. So you got to be very careful with that one, because, of course, can backfire as soon as things start to go wrong. Whatsoever there as well. There's a very interesting comment here as well regarding alliances, so take a look at this. In September, you delayed the alliances in favor of going live with the long-anticipated world restructuring. Is there any update you can provide on the alliance system? Will it return at some point in the next year? The terms world restructuring and alliances are often used by our community interchangeably, despite being very different things. World restructuring describes the new team-based world vs. world matchmaking system that we've been developing for the past years, while alliances are a subcomponent of that system that allows multiple small, mid-sized guilds to group together for matchmaking. After we started digging into the alliances implementation, it became increasingly clear to us that we were on the path to building a system that would largely be a duplicate of the guild system and the functionality that they offer. This is very interesting. Players can already create alliance-like guilds that contain up to 500 players, which, of course, was the same cap as alliances, by the way. The main downside of this pivot is that not every player has a free guild slot they're willing to use to join a new super guild. We're actively looking into solutions for this that don't require the steep development investment that alliances would. We should have more news to share. This is actually very interesting. This is so weird. This is an unbelievably big statement. I'm not sure what word I wanted to use there, but this is saying we are not doing alliances anymore, right? Which I think I'm not too worried about that. It definitely does suck that there's what's a bit painful is that there might not end up being like the competitive architecture, so stuff like leaderboards and so on. For World versus World, they're just going to go, oh yeah, world restructuring, and then maybe not add anything else onto that, which I actually think would be really unfortunate, because that's a big thing that's missing there in alliances. But I'm honestly amazed how frank this communication is. It's weird because, you know, a lot of the time ArenaNet, they are a bit fluffy, to be frank, right? There's a lot of PR speak, a lot of like, it's on the table, to be frank, you know, well, who even knows what that means, right? This is extremely explicit. This statement says, alliances are... No, we're not doing that anymore. And it's being replaced by world restructuring, which was kind of confirmed in some of the previous posts, but again, in a kind of woolly way, right? Like a little vague. It left some openness to interpretation. This, way less so. This is like a huge, like, GG there for World vs. World alliances. So there you go. That's very interesting to see how that one's going to pan out there as well. I do hope that there will be some kind of competitive infrastructure also added there. With the world system to kind of have that, you know, that meaningful winning, losing, like competing with, you know, like actually battling between these worlds, because that was kind of what alliances were going to end up being, right? Like there was going to be that component to it, but that seems to no longer be on the table. So hopefully there is a replacement for that. But yeah, you love to see it. I love a little bit of clear communication. That definitely is it. And here's a fun meme as well, okay? We're just kind of skipping through some of these topics. There's some pretty cool stuff here, I think. Could you share which activities you plan to focus on for future improvements and expansion? In the first half of the next year, we're introducing the Temple of Feber Strike mission and a new 5-player fractal with the challenge mode. Lovely. First half of a new year as well, by the way. So, you know, the fractal is going to be coming pretty soon, which is pretty cool. Beyond that, I think fans will be pretty stoked when they hear about our plans for endgame PvE content on our next expansion. You know, this is such a meme statement to me. I'm not going to lie. You know, I'll believe it when I see it. You know, I'm here. We're just gaming guys. We're playing our video games. I am. You know what? I'm gonna have to be a little mean here. Not good enough. This means nothing to me. I'm not gonna lie. At this point, like where we're at in Guild Wars 2. Like when you release something like Dagda CM, the strike missions for Soto, very mediocre. The strike mission challenge mode with Dagda, the Cosmic Observatory, easily the easiest in the game, and design, to be frank, pretty bad. Overall, not a very well designed encounter, not a very well implemented encounter. Severe bugs day one that are unlikely to be fixed. I mean, yeah, yeah, okay. People are gonna get coped up on this, and actually, I'm almost a little bit upset at a comment like this, because people are gonna get coped up and go like, oh yeah, they're gonna do a raid or something like that, which I think is extremely unlikely. But like statements like this almost upset me, because it's like, come on, right? Like I feel like we're stringing people along at this point, right? Like we're just like whipping people up into a cope frenzy, whereas in reality, like, I don't think there's any particularly good evidence to suggest that like a kind of endgame PvE content in Guild Wars 2 is gonna be anything above like pretty okay for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, which it definitely sucks to say that, but you know, the game is definitely focusing more on the open world story components, and that's where they really want to deliver that experience. That's where they really want to deliver the good part of the game that they really excel at, they really focus on. So, I mean, we'll see. You know, I hope I'm wrong, obviously, you know, but, like, I am bound by honesty to tell you what I actually think and how I actually feel about, like, the potential of stuff like this in Guild Wars 2. There's a growing interest in alternate modes like hardcore, classic servers. This is kind of interesting, actually. Do you have any plans to offer anything like this? The answer is no, by the way. Like, no. Yeah, it's not a priority. Trend chasing is inherently risky and could potentially alienate your existing fans if it goes poorly. From what we've observed in the industry over the past few years, it usually doesn't pan out. For now, we're focusing on serving our current community and making Guild Wars 2 the best it can be. You know, this is a very interesting statement. I wonder what they're talking. I wonder what Grouch is talking about here specifically. I guess I've never heard. You know, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, there probably are a bunch of kind of failed hardcore or, you know, failed classic things, right, in MMOs out there that I just have never heard of because they're just dead, right? But of course, it does extremely well in World of Warcraft. And of course, RuneScape, those are the two big ones where that does really, really well. I'm not gonna lie, I actually don't think classic Guild Wars 2 would be very good at all, to be honest, because Guild Wars 2, on its release, it was not very well fleshed out from a systems perspective. It was a bit scuffed, you know, PvP was weird, World was weird, you had stuff like culling, balance was a complete clown fiesta, right? Like, you did not have any real endgame content that existed whatsoever. It was a pretty unfinished game, and I have to give Guild Wars 2 credit for this. It's one of the very few MMOs that I think is pretty consistently improved from a systems point of view as time goes on, right? Stuff like the PvP system is way better, World versus World system is way better, PvE systems are way more fleshed out as well. So, you know, I don't think classic Guild Wars 2 would be particularly good, to be honest. Outside of, I would say, funnily enough, World versus World and PvP, although that's because of balance, not because of systems, of course, right? Like, PvP and World versus World have certainly been made consistently worse over time because of skill design and balancing, which, to be fair, is actually being improved now. It was more that the company didn't really care about PvP and World vs. World balance for the majority of the game's history, and, you know, obviously, when you design the game like that, it's obviously not going to work out well. But yeah, classic, yeah, not gonna happen there. That's definitely a little bit of a meme. And another bit of information about this, we kind of already knew this here as well, and of course, ArenaNet can't really say too much about this. But yeah, it's on the table to get some graphical improvements. Like, it's probably not going to be anything super major, right? It's going to be more of like the one thing that we've heard is kind of in the works, right? Is like splitting post-processing into different effects. You can like turn off the bloom, right, but keep some of the other effects on, stuff like that, right? Like, that's the type of improvement I expect to see to the game. And just some other visual stuff as well. And we can see here that like new shaders and lighting options are available because of DirectX 11. So that could be really cool. You know, like, I think that world design is really good in Guild Wars 2, and honestly stuff like lighting especially can really take that to the next level and create a really immersive atmospheric environment, especially when you have these kind of like really big spectacle fights, right? Like these really big spectacle encounters and world bosses and story beats, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we absolutely love to see it. I love the dungeon question as well here as well. This one's good. The base game's dungeons look a bit like leftover content at this point. What a brutal question. But they can be really cool in terms of story and atmosphere. Did you consider adding challenge modes to make them relevant once again for the endgame loop? No, this is not something we're currently considering. I mean, I actually think that this is not a very good question. The better question is like, do you plan to go and fix the systems? Because that's kind of the problem with dungeons. Dungeons are fine in terms of what they are. I don't think they don't need to be hard or anything like that, and I think they are relevant in the endgame loop. If you have like a good dungeon group, you can actually get a lot of gold per hour there, but the main issue with dungeons is extreme bugs. They are extremely buggy, which it sucks. Like potentially, you know, NPCs getting stuck is the really big one, or just stuff not working, weird stuff going on. And the reward structure, right? It's a very outdated reward structure. You can kind of only get exotic, non-stat selectable gear. Like the drops you get in there are weird and they fill your inventory up. If that got a refresh, then I think dungeons could actually be in a pretty decent position, to be perfectly honest with you, because they are actually gold efficient if you get good at them. And I think players have kind of learned that a little bit during Dungeon Rush as well. That's kind of an interesting meme to think about there as well. The Wizard's Vault objectives seem a bit too skewed towards PvP. Is there any... This is really interesting. I mean... Because then I'm pretty sure you just get the same PvP objectives basically all the time. It is that way for world versus world. So a very interesting question. But I think the criticism here is that basically you get the same PvE objectives coming up over and over and over and over and over again, which is definitely a very valid point of feedback. There's some other issues with the Vault as well overall. But yeah, I'm surprised they haven't added more Vault objectives. So they rotate around. But it definitely is a really difficult job, right? Because of how many... Because PvE is less open. A lot of the PvP in World vs. World, they're very generic. It's like, oh yeah, just go get some World XP. Oh yeah, just go play some PvP, right? So those are kind of less repetitive in a sense because you're just playing the game. It's very passive in the background, just kind of happening. Whereas PvE, it's going to tell you, right, you need to go here and do this event. You need to go here and do that, right? So there's almost some inherent... repetitiveness, right, to the way that PvE is going to work. They need to have like a really wide variety of objectives. So adding that is definitely going to be good. I just like do them in World vs. World, to be honest. It's definitely easy to do them in World vs. World and PvP for the reason that I just described there, right? But yeah, there we go. I mean, that's basically all of the juice, in my opinion, right? That's where the content is, guys. You know, a lot of this is just kind of some basic talking about, like, oh yeah, we're doing the seasonal MMO now. Oh, we're doing the thing. Oh my god, we're going crazy, guys. We're going absolutely insane. Look, we saw more first-time players in 2023 than we did at any point during the COVID-19 pandemic gaming boom. Wow, dude, Guild Wars 2 is popping off. Guild Wars 2 has always been very powered by new players, which does make sense, right? Like, it is a game that doesn't really focus on retaining players. It's more about acquiring new players, right, and getting players in there. Just because of the nature of it, right? Like no sub fee, for example, and just this kind of episodic content and, you know, a slower content release schedule and less focus on kind of vertical progression and just progression in general. It's more of like it almost has like a single player element to it. So like new players are really important to the business model with how it works. Kind of, you know, again, microtransactions, right? Like new players get in, they get that credit card, they swipe on the gem store. We absolutely love to see it. Indeed, indeed, indeed. And actually, here is an interesting meme here as well. So there's been a lot of speculation about how the future expansion is going to look compared to Secrets of the Score. Is it going to be bigger? Is it going to be smaller? Is it going to be the same? And there's a little bit of insight on this here as well. The overall shape of development between expansions 4 and 5 are very similar. So expansion 4 is Soto, and 5 is the one that's coming next year. So the overall shape of it is very similar. Timelines, resourcing, etc. So in other words, there is... It looks like it's going to be relatively similar. Of course, Grouch does go on to say here that they had a more streamlined process for expansion 5, right? Like, you know, we're able to focus more on refining our development rather than reinventing them, which is kind of what they did for Soto. So, that means they can better identify production issues like undocumented dependencies, bottlenecks, resourcing issues. It means we can proactively address these issues in future dev cycles. From our experiences with Soto alone, we've adjusted development, review process, dev resource allocations, documentation communication, blah, 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 blah. So in other words, it's going to be similar, but probably maybe a little bit more, or of a little higher quality, right? Like a bit more refined, right? So, in my opinion, I was expecting Soto to be a pretty decent estimation of what Guild Wars 2 looks like in the future, and this statement here very much confirms that, or suggests that at the absolute very least, is that Secrets of the Obscure is a pretty good bar to set your expectations at for the future of Guild Wars 2 in terms of the amount of content that's going to be released, and kind of the nature of that content as well. And again, we can kind of carry that on to the little mini updates, right? Like the quarterly updates are probably also going to be similar in scope for the time to come. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I'm going to say, right? Like, that is the expectation. This is the future. The future of Guild Wars 2 is confirmed. Wow. And, oh, look, the expansions. They're on sale, guys. Buy them using my referral link. Oh, yeah. Yeah, anyway. We've got our legendary armor, legendary strike mission. It's coming soon, guys. That's basically it. Right? A little bit of an update there here for the end of the year. Again, like I said, the actual blog post here is actually slightly more vague than this interview. So, props to WCCF Tech here for not only getting this interview, but getting the squeezing Grouch here, getting some very frank communication. We love to see that. Definitely check this article out there as well for sure. But yeah, the blog post here is very similar, actually, in kind of the sentiment. It's like, oh yeah, what a year for Guild Wars 2. Oh, things are happening, but slightly more vague. Like, for example, you'll notice here, right? Like, this is not only the 5th expansion at the moment, but we're also having conversation about what comes after that. So again, they don't say that expansion 6 is confirmed, whereas they very much do so in the other one. So again, very similar but slightly more vague. And there's like a cool song, right, about the floating tower, about Secrets of the Obscure that you can listen to here as well. So there you go. I mean, that's pretty epic there. Happy Winter's Day. We'll see you in 2024. But yeah, there you go. That's it. And that's going to be it for me. More content to come in the future. I've been taking a little bit of a break recently, but do not worry, I'll be back here on the YouTube channel with a variety of exciting things all over the place. I don't know, maybe Zero to Hero is coming back. I don't know, okay? I can neither confirm nor deny. But anyway, that is going to do it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about what's going on in the comments. Like the video, subscribe on YouTube, come back and watch every day. I will return to the internet at some point in the near future. But until then, I'm out of here. Take it easy, gamers. I'll see you next time.